Hello, and welcome to another edition From the Pastor's Heart. Today, I'd like to talk with you about leadership. Specifically, the type of leadership that God calls us to, that servant leadership. And now, I have been fortunate in my lifetime that I've worked under some incredible leaders. And it may be hard to imagine, but two of the best leaders that I've ever worked with and two that I've actually tried to model my own life from were two sergeants that I worked for when I was in Germany, when I was in 3rd Armored Division. The first one was Sergeant First Class Gary Dahl. He was the NCOIC of the 3rd Armored Division Chaplain's office. And their office was upstairs from ours. We were the chapel and the support command. But I was privileged to not only see him work, but also to work with him. And the other one was Staff Sergeant Mary McEntee. And she was my boss for the last 2 years that I was in Germany. And she was the one, my immediate boss. Now, Sergeant Dahl and Sergeant McEntee, they were very different people. That they had different perspectives, they had different ways of doing things, but there were 5 things that I found that were similar, that they did very, very well, and so I'd like to talk about those 5 things today with you, because I think that Jesus tells us that we are to, if we're to be a leader, we're to be a servant of all. I think so. Here are again 2 people that really modeled this for me. And I would encourage you, if you're a leader or if you are involved in leadership in any way, shape, or form, to really think through these 5 things. And so the first one is that both of them set the example of working hard. That neither one of them were sergeants. And I know in the military we hear a lot about the fact that when you become an NCO, that the first thing you do is you find the lower enlisted and you give them a bunch of work to do, and then you just sit there and drink coffee and watch them. And unfortunately, there was a lot of that going on when I was in the Army, but not where I worked. That so often those two NCOs were many times the first ones there, and unfortunately many times the last ones home. And they were both 2 of the hardest workers that I've ever known. And they passed it on. And this was the time we were learning about computers. We were learning about all kinds of things at the time. And this was at the Berlin Wall came down while I was there. So it was a pretty hectic time, especially that last year I was there. And one thing that I've always appreciated about them, that there was never a, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. They modeled the fact that they expected us to work hard. But we worked hard because we saw those that we were working for and our immediate supervisors who were working as hard, if not most of the time, even harder than what we were, even though we didn't necessarily see it at the time. And along with that, the second principle I see from them is that they kept the mission at the forefront. And so just like anywhere else, but especially in the chaplaincy, that there's all kinds of things that kind of get in the way, all kinds of things that we could be doing. But if you get off on the rabbit trails, then you don't end up doing what actually needs to be done. I mean, we had to put together, we did two Catholic services every Sunday. We did a Protestant service every Sunday. We had Sunday school we had to worry about. We had bulletins to type. We had all kinds of things. So we were basically doing the work for 2 different, completely self-contained churches that happened to meet in the same building. And I always liked the fact that Mary always had a plan. That we had a plan of the things that we did on Monday. We had a plan on things that we did on Tuesday, and that and because she was organized and because she kept us organized, so us would be me basically, that when the surprises came, they never actually really caught us that much by surprise. We could make it through the tyranny of the urgent because the mission was always at the forefront, and the mission was to make sure that we do whatever we can as support system, as the support staff, to give everybody who's going to church. Now, she was a Catholic, I was a Protestant, but we wanted to make sure that whoever came to our chapel, they had the best experience possible as they were worshiping the Lord on Sunday. And Sergeant Dahl, with all the stuff he was doing upstairs with dealing with other chaplains, they were in charge of every other chaplain in 3rd Armored. And you could get overwhelmed very easily. But he was a master at making sure that we knew what the mission was, and so he could prioritize what needed to be done. And in a lot of ways, I saw him steering the 3rd Armored Division chaplain so that he would be able to use his time most effectively. I'm not sure if any of them actually ever figured it out, but because he was a master at working with people, but especially keeping the mission at the forefront. And the other thing that they did, and I saw this more with Sergeant Dahl than I did with Mary, because I mean, I was the one here, and I was the one that was working with her. But he also was able to align the best person for the task, and so you wouldn't necessarily think that on paper somebody else may be the one who's the best suited for the task, but he knew his people who worked for him, and he knew who worked well together, and. I remember we had a chaplain Joe, who just passed away recently, and he was our Catholic priest the last couple of years that I was there. And Father Joe was an interesting guy. He was from India, and he didn't always understand kind of how Americans did things. And so the one assistant that he would have with Father was Wanda Perez. Wanda was from Puerto Rico, and that. Nothing that Father ever did ever really bothered her. She kind of rolled with things, and we would go out in the field. She would tuck us in at night, and she was kind of the mom. But whereas Father might frustrate others, that never really frustrated Wanda. That they actually got along really well, and it was she was the best person to have with him, and he was really really good at doing that. He had two other assistants. Who worked with him, Dawn and Yvonne, and he would put the right person with the chaplain or in the job that needed to be done. And you do that, you don't frustrate people, and we didn't get burnt out, especially when we were in the field and we worked a lot of hours. But because he was able to put the right person in the right job to set them up for success, that there was a lot of fun in the process. And then the fourth principle I saw from these two incredible leaders was that they were both quick to share the credit, but they were very slow to pass the blame. And so often, in any military organization, really any organization, they say the key to good leadership is finding somebody that you can pass the blame on if things go wrong. And now, because they were such good leaders, we didn't have a lot of things that went wrong, but every once in a while, that things kind of blew up on us. And they never, no matter how easily it could be, they never passed the blame down. That now, of course, I mean, if we did something wrong, they would tell us about it. I mean, and they should as leaders. But they weren't out to make themselves look good by pushing things down on somebody else. And on the other side is that when good things happen and when their subordinates did good things, they were very quick to make sure that the chaplain knew about it, that others knew about that. And so the other officers in 3rd Armored, they knew the various chaplain assistants, those who went to the chapel, the commanding general, the chief of staff, and others. They knew the staff, and they knew what the staff did well. And the reason that they did was because our leadership had no problem passing on the credit when good things happen. And then the last thing, which may be the most important, is that both of those NCOs cared about their subordinates. They really cared about us, and I know that Mary was very concerned that I was taking care of my family. I remember when my daughter was born, that Mary called me in and said, Jane's in the hospital. She was born in a German hospital, so she was going to be there for a few days. You don't need to take the time off. You need to be here. And so that way you're not using up all of your leave while she's in the hospital. And so that made sense. And so I remember driving into work, and the first thing she did was she walked into my office and she said, Dan, we have somebody in our congregation who just had a baby. And so I think that as a chaplain assistant and as somebody who works with the youth and is the choir director of our chapel, that it would probably be a really good idea if you were to represent our office there at the hospital. So what I need you to do is I need you to go to the Herbst Hospital and spend some time with her. And it was my wife. So she made a way that I could actually spend some time with her without taking leave. And I can remember, you all know I'm a cat person, that when my cat, Liesel von Paw, she came down with feline leukemia, and I had to take her in, and we found out it had the test and found out we had to put her down. And Sergeant Dahl was he had a cat. He was a cat person, and when he found out that I had to put her down, it was. I knew he cared, and that it wasn't just a "Hey, I'm sorry for your loss." I mean, it was really, how are you doing, kind of thing. And he would come down a couple times during that afternoon, just to make sure I was okay. And it's amazing what you'll do for somebody and the work that you'll put in when you know that they actually care. And I think about what was it that made these two NCOs so good. Well, the thing was that they were modeling what Jesus did. They were to my mind, they were the ultimate example of servant leadership. And so I've taken so much of their lessons to heart. And I can still see sometimes when I'm doing something that, and I can think to myself, well, I'm going to make Mary proud today because I'm doing something right or something, or something that I have seen her do. And, or if I'm, if I'm doing, the admin work, which you all know I don't like doing, that I can remember just seeing, Sergeant Dahl pouring through the various paperwork and so on that the chaplain didn't want to do. And he did it to free the chaplain up to do the ministry that he needed to do. And I began to realize that, having the best person in the job, well, even if that's me, doing work I don't want to do, because the mission comes first. So I hope that you're encouraged by these words. I would pray that if you're a leader, that you would take these 5 things into account. And if you are a person who's serving under somebody, whether it's a person at work, whether it's a person at the church, and you see these 5 principles exemplified and lived out in their lives, just come alongside and say, hey, thank you. Because they are, those leaders really are a gift that God has given you. And to make you doing your service and your work so much better and so much easier. So I pray that you have a wonderful time with your siblings in Christ, and I just pray that that God would continue to bless. And I look forward to seeing you again in a future video. God bless you all.